All right, so since we've talked about all that stuff, I first just want to start off by going over this solving by the quadratic formula. We skipped this part B, so how about if I start off by doing that for today, just to kind of refresh our memory a little bit on what that was all about. So this is a quadratic because it's x squared. And so just thinking about this graphically, I know that this is a parabola. I know it opens upward because the leading coefficient is positive. And so I might have two answers because parabola could have two roots where it hits the x-axis twice. It might have one root where it comes down and just bounces off of it, or it might not have any roots where it doesn't cross the x-axis at all. So to figure that out, I'm going to move that -1 over, and we have 5x squared minus 2x plus 1 is equal to 0. Now, if you guys remember, my advice the other day was, first try and solve it by factoring if you can, and then if not, use the quadratic formula. But because this is in the quadratic formula section, I'm just going to jump right into that. And so my A value is 5, B is -2, and C is 1. So plugging those into the quadratic formula, x equals the opposite of A, which is 2, plus or minus the square root of 2 squared, which of course is 4, -2 squared, I should say, B squared, minus 4 times our A, which is 5, times our C, which is 1, all over 2 times A. So I was using this quadratic formula and just plugging in A, B, and C, and I now have to simplify that. So if I'm going too fast, just let me know and I'll slow down, okay? So I have x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of, now this number under here is really important. So 4 times 5 times 1 is 20, and 4 minus 20 is -16, all over 10. Now remember that square root of -16 we can write as 4i, because the square root of 16 is 4 and the square root of -1 is I. So I can write that as 2 plus or minus 4i over 10. And then canceling a 2 from each part, x equals 1 plus or minus 2i all over 5. So there are our two solutions. So we got two complex solutions because we have an I in there. What that means graphically, it means graphically there are no roots. There are no x-intercepts. Okay, the parabola does not cross the x-axis. That, because we got an imaginary solution, that's what that means graphically. All right, so taking the idea of parabolas and their roots and where they cross the axis, I'm going to do the free-falling objects on a whole different sheet. So I'm going to open up a new sketch here and take some notes on free-falling objects. So I would say that you probably would want to write this in a different section of your notes. So like pulling up a different note sheet as opposed to just continuing on that unit 2. And so for free falling objects, let's start with this example. The height of a rocket can be found by the function okay, so the height of a rocket, which is of course going to blast off and then come back down to Earth, it can be found by the function h of t. I wrote h of t because that's height after t is time, height after a certain amount of time. So h of t is negative 16 t squared plus 235t plus 133. So the height of a rocket can be found by the function h of t is negative 16t squared plus 235t plus 133. We're going to answer, let's answer a couple questions. How long is the rocket in the air? So that'll be our first question.
This is literally rocket
How about
science.
what is its max height?
Mac, this isn't rocket science, it's rocket mathematics.
So we got this rocket, shoots up in the air for a certain amount of time, comes back down, hits Earth. We want to know how long is it in the air and how high did it get? And it follows this function. So I'm going to graph that on my graphing calculator. So I'm going to do two examples. I'll do the first one using the app, and the second one using the handheld, and then I can, of course, answer any questions if you guys want me to in either way. So if I open up the app, I always like to open up a new one for each problem that I'm doing. So I'm going to do a new graph. And here I need to type in my equation. So I have negative 16. I'm not going to use t. I have to use down in the bottom the x. Okay, and remembering that that means time. So negative 16x squared plus 235x plus 133. All right, before I hit enter, I want to talk about this for just a minute. So first, I'm expecting some things to happen. I think it's going to be a parabola because it's a squared term. And I think it's going to open upside down because of the negative 16. So it's going to, and that's going to be like the height is going to come back down. So I'm expecting that upside down U shape. Now, if I hit enter, it certainly does not look like that. So I need to be able to manipulate the settings on my calculator, and this is going to be like part of something that you will need to know how to do. So I want to walk you through how to do that. All right, somebody said, isn't it 255? No, 235. Thank you. I just had a question whether I think my equation is correct there. All right, so I'm expecting an upside down parabola. This certainly doesn't look like one. So what I think is that this thing that looks like a straight line is either the right edge or the left edge of this parabola. So what I want to do is I want to extend the window up to see if I can see any more of this shape. So on the app, if you hit the upper left-hand corner, hit the tool bar and go to window, and I'm going to go to Windows settings. On the handheld, you can just zoom out. You can't do that on the app. But I need to change my Y maximum so that I can see more of the top of the graph. Right now, it only goes up to 6.6. So, and I don't know what to make it. I usually multiply by a factor of 10, but just to keep a round number instead of 60, I'm just going to make it 100 and take a look at what that looks like. So I'm changing my Y maximum to 100. And I'll hit OK. And that at least is, it's not looking like it's straight up anymore, but I can't see the whole parabola, but it's taking a little bit of shape. I still need to go higher though. So I'll go back to my toolbar. So in the upper left-hand corner, back to the toolbar. And so being able to do this process and fiddle around with your calculator is going to be a skill that we're going to have to work on. So I'm going to hit Windows Settings. And my Y max, now to multiply by a factor of 10, I'm just going to add a 0. So I'm going to make it 1,000 now. So it goes up quite a bit. I hit OK. All right, so that's looking better. But now I need to extend my window off to the right because I don't see the right side of the graph. So that's extending my X maximum because I need my X's to go higher than 10. So I'll go back to the toolbar, go to my window settings, and I need to increase my X max, and I just am going to put a 0 on the end. All right, so here is my upside down parabola. So now I have the picture that I expected. So the first question was, how long is it in the air? So remember, this is the height after time. So when the height is 0, meaning down at the x-intercept, I want to be able to find the x-intercept of this graph. Okay, better known as the root or the 0. So I'm going to use the calculator to help me do that. So I'll hit the toolbar. And I have to back up and go to the tools because I now want to go to Analyze Graph. Yeah. Your parabola. Okay, what does it look like? Okay, so somebody's parabola doesn't look like this. So let's first check the equation and make sure we didn't miss an x. Perfect, you have the equation right. So now let's go to the tools. Okay, and let's go to Window and Windows Settings. So your X min is -10. What's your Y min? Okay, what's your Y max? 100. Okay, can you still see the top of the parabola? Okay. All right, sounds good. All right, so and if any of you guys, if you need me to help you walk through how to do this, okay, I definitely want you guys to be able to do this. Even though we'll have some time to practice it in class, you don't want to be sitting at home and not have anybody to be able to help you through the calculator stuff. So I'm going to find the 0. So I'm going to hit the toolbar. And I back up out of the tools and go to Analyze Graph. And I want the 0, the top thing. And it brings up this line here. So I'm trying to find this x-intercept down at the bottom. So I need to move to the left of it and let go, and then move the right to the right of it. And I have 15.2, 0. So that means it was in the air 15.2, and I didn't give a reference, but let's call it seconds. And it would be at a height of 0, meaning it's on the ground. All right, I also want to find the maximum height. So that's the top of the parabola, the maximum. So I'll go back to the tools. and I'll go to maximum. And I, again, get this line that I have to move to the left of the maximum and then open it up to the right of the maximum. And I get this 7.34, comma 996.
I didn't get that.
All right, now for this, when you guys are working on your delta math, it might ask you to round it to 3 decimal places or 4 decimal places. And sometimes it doesn't display that. So let me show you how to change that so that you know how to change it in your settings. Next to the tool, if you bounce over 2 to the right, there's an icon that's supposed to be a graph with a settings thing on it. So it's towards the upper left-hand corner, 2 spots over from the toolbar, but it would bring up this display. Mine is set to float 3. If I change that to whatever, float 6 and hit OK, now notice that my points up here now have 6 sig figs or 6 digits. So does my one down here. Now 0 didn't change because 0 is just 0. Okay, so if it's a whole number, it might not change. But if you're trying to round it, this will round it for you in terms of however many digits you want to have. So it's in the air 15.2 seconds. Now the height is 995.9. So it's the Y value. Remember, the input is the time and the output is the height. So for how long is the rocket in the air? The rocket was in the air 15.2 seconds. And what is the height? The height is the Y value of the maximum, 995.9. Okay, so we had to graph it, and messing with our window, that's a big deal. So being able to manipulate the window so that we get a good look at our graph. Then we have to find either the zeros or mins or maxes and interpret what those mean in the real life context of the problem. All right, let's try another one, okay? And this one I'll do on a handheld, but whatever device you're working on, try and do it on both of them. You can do both of them on the handheld or both on the app, just to make sure that you know how to do it. So for our next example, a company makes widgets and the profit function is this. P of W, because it's the profit per widget. So P of W equals -9 W squared plus 700 W minus 6,005. All right, so we have a company that makes some object, these widgets, and the profit function is given by this. So instead of asking a question, I'm just going to graph that and then start talking about what different parts of it mean. So for this, I have to change my screen. To our handheld here. And so in the handheld calculator, I will hit this button towards the top left, which is going to pull up my graph. And I'll type in my equation. So -9 x squared, remember I have to use x, plus 700x minus 6005. So again, I'm expecting an upside down parabola because I have an x squared and it's a negative leading coefficient. When I hit enter, I don't get anything that looks remotely like that. And I don't know if this is the right side of the graph or the left side of the graph or what. So I'm going to extend my y maximum to see if I can find the top of this parabola. So on the handheld, you go to menu, just like you had that tool icon in the other one. Go to menu and window, and then Windows settings. And I'm going to change my Y max to be 100 again. All right, so I can't see the top, but I do see that it appears as though this parabola is going off and to the right. So I need to change my X max and my Y max so I can see higher and more off to the right. So I'll go back to the menu and go to the window and Windows settings. And I'm going to add a 0 to my X max and to my Y max. So that's going to move the graph. I'm going to see more of the top and more of the right. All right, so we're getting there. But I still can't see the top, so I got to go back and add another 0 to the Y max. So go to menu, window, and Windows settings, put another 0. And so you can see how this can be difficult and kind of tedious to get a decent look at the graph. So that's really what kind of today's class is mostly about, is being able to use your calculator properly. All right, so again, this is our profit graph. So one question might be, well, what's the maximum profit? So of course, this maximum point would be an important one. So I could go under menu and analyze graph, find the maximum, and I have to go to the left of, I'm looking for the maximum. So I go to the left of it and click, move to the right of it and click. So what these points mean, this means that if I make 38.8 or 39 widgets, I make the most money. I make $7,606 if I make 39 widgets. If I make less than 39 widgets, I make less money, maybe because I don't have enough to sell, or maybe because it costs too much to produce them also. Yes. Ah, good. What does it say? All right, awesome. Thank you for pointing that out. So we have a maximum that has an E in it. So let me take a look at that. Something like this, like I have up here. And if you have that, it doesn't mean your calculator's goofy. It means this is scientific notation. So that means 7.6 times 10 to the third which means we would move the decimal over 3 spots, which would be 7,600. So one way to deal with that is you can change your settings. So you can do that by going to the menu and going down to the settings, and your display digits, you can make it display as many digits as you want. Okay? So yeah, no, please continue to bring up those questions. That's awesome, because that's exactly the type of troubleshooting that we're going to run into that we want to be able to figure out while we're in class. Another question might be for this function, like how many widgets do you have? So here we make $7,600. So how many widgets would you have to produce to make $5,000? Well, 5,000 would be down here somewhere. So what I could do is I could graph another line at 5,000. If I hit the tab button, which is the third one down over here, it allows me to type in another function. In fact, you can type in many of them. So I'm just going to type in 5,000 and hit enter. On the app, you would there we go. In the upper right corner, there's a circle with a plus sign. And if you hit that, it should pull up another function for you. Yeah. So if I want to know how many widgets do I have to produce to make 5,000, oops. Now I messed up my screen. Let me pull it. Oh, now I messed up my function. Sorry, guys, give me just a moment. I need to retype my function. So a nice feature, and sometimes not so nice feature, is that I can grab a function and manipulate it. The problem is, if you grab it and manipulate it when you don't mean to, like I just did, then you have to go back and retype it in. So once again, we are troubleshooting. All right, so I want to find these points here, these intersection points. So I'll go to menu and analyze graph, and it's going to allow me to find an intersection. So I'll move to the left of the intersection, and you have to find them one at a time. You can't do them both at the same time, unfortunately. So there is the first intersection, which means I would have to produce 22 widgets to make $5,000. And then I could do the next one. Did it again. Sorry. And if I produced 56 widgets, I would also make $5,000. And now some of you might say, well, why wouldn't you make more if you produced more? Well, that's because there's production costs. And sometimes if you make too many, then there's a whole supply and demand idea where you can't sell them for as much. So this is what a company would do. There's kind of a sweet spot, a magic number to where the supply and the demand have a great balance and your production costs are as low as possible to give you a maximum profit. Those would be found up here at the maximum of that function. If you want to make sure you make $5,000, if you produce 22 of them, you would make $5,000, or 56 of them, you would make $5,000 also. All right, you guys have any other questions before I move on to something else?
Can you show us how to expand the screen on the app again?
He can't hear us.
All right, I don't know if you guys, if I can hear you guys, I apologize, but if you do have a question, write it in the chat. If I don't respond to it, it's because I can't hear you, not because I'm ignoring you. All right, so